Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We know that hysteria creates certain situations, but rarely has this hysteria generated purposely been used as a war strategy. And you would believe and agree with me that China is adept at the art of war. They're adept. They find innovative ways to conduct a war. The war can be either a raging war, it can be economic war, it can be a war of disinformation, it can be a war fought very decently, very quietly, and it can be a war by creating fear. This year, 2020, will go down into the history as the Great Hysteria. This year is the year of hysteria, was rather 2020. This was the year when the world, entire world, abandoned critical thinking. And this critical thinking was replaced by irrational fear. For many of us, this has been the first experience to see madness of the crowds and state totalitarianism. And all that as a result of creating a hysteria built on the biggest lie ever told, the lie about the coronavirus. We've been told that this is the next big thing after the Spanish flu, and the lockdowns were necessary to prevent the virus from killing millions. But if you look at the data which has been collected, collated, analyzed from April 20, the facts are clear. The average annual 2-year mortality rate in 2020 from coronavirus will be the second lowest in the history. How is it Spanish flu? The virus is a bad flu of somewhat less severity even than H1N1 or the Hong Kong flu. The science has always been very clear. Even if the virus was as bad as the Spanish flu, the lockdowns would not have been the remedy. Innumerable scientific studies, at least 20 studies I have seen, both before and during 2020, confirm that lockdowns do not work, instead cause net harm. But how did the world go wrong? That's a major thing. How could people not see through the reality? The answer is plain, and yet people don't see it. It's an elephant in the room. It's China. While the great hysteria was going on, Donald Trump went from an unlosable situation and fighting for his career. And the entire world went backward. And can you believe? While the entire world was suffering from economic depression and recession, China has ended up with GDP growth stronger than ever before. The people who have talked to me, the globalists, the promoters of the Great Reset, and the people who have been talking about it, the vaccine companies. So these two groups, the globalists, promoters of the Great Reset, like Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and the vaccine companies, the drug companies are the major principal drivers of this hysteria. And this hysteria was generated and then utilized, exploited by China. Both the groups, globalists and the vaccine companies, have gained economically. But the way It has been used by China to A, ensure the removal of Trump, then mass scale cyber warfare that China has demonstratively deployed in this war. Sherlock Holmes had written, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So when you have eliminated the impossible, what has remained is supposed to be truth. Now, if you look at that from this dictum of Sherlock Holmes, you would find that all roads lead to Beijing. It is President Z alone who has said, and I may add very brilliantly, he orchestrated the Great Hysteria. The novel coronavirus pandemic in 2019 gave him an opportunity, which he grabbed hands with both hands. Very astute, he not only wiped out the threat of Donald Trump, but grievously harmed two major countries, USA and India, because these are the only two nations which have the potential to challenge China. The main evidence which I'm going to talk about is lockdowns are purely X's invention. Second, the Great Hysteria was drummed up by China alone. And thirdly, carefully groomed stooges that China had placed over the years in key places in WHO and Western institutions were sowing the seeds of confusion. To understand China's undeclared covert war of 2020, you need to look at the theory of war, the principles of war articulated by Sun Tzu include, and that's important, all wars are based on deception, supreme intelligence, and excellent consistent breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Know the enemy, let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and make way by unexpected routes and attacks unguarded spots. If you remember, in 1999, Unrestricted Warfare was published by People's Liberation Army of China. Unrestricted warfare. And these principles were refined for the modern use. Conventional military cannot easily resolve conflicts. That was the conclusion. And one of the authors of the book, Qiu Liang, said the first rule of unrestricted warfare is that there are no rules. So all those Vienna conventions and everything went overboard. There are no rules and nothing is forbidden. So the book, which is a Bible for PLA, war will be reborn in another form, another arena. In terms of beyond limit warfare, spaces in the nature including the ground, sea, air, and outer space of the battlefields. But most important is social spaces, politics, economics, culture, and psyche. So warfare can be military, it can be quasi-military, it can be non-military. It can be violent, it can be non-violent. It can be confrontation between the professional soldiers or between emerging forces consisting primarily of ordinary people. And come to that Xi's 2013 One Belt, One Road initiative is a critical part of this covert war, and it allowed China to build very close links with Africa, Italy, and Australia. And all these links were used in 2020. Xi was aware that 4 more years of Donald Trump would cause Chinese Communist Party to implode. So, get rid of. Here comes in the Trojan horse of the lockdowns. In China, actually conducted itself in a very suspicious manner. It imposed lockdown in Yuan, the place from where coronavirus erupted. No one would have ever suspected China of declaring war in this way. It locked itself first, so people had sympathy with it. And just like the Trojan horse was dragged inside Troy by the getting the citizens excited about something amazing, China managed to excite the West. They said, well, okay, we had a lockdown and there were no deaths. People did not die. He imposed a lockdown in January 2020 as a remedy to stop internal government criticism of the government. People of the China should not criticize it. And then he realized he could use to get West to self-destruct. And West did it. India did it. Jinping surely was careful about the character of the Western leaders. He knew his enemies. And he found that there was nobody like Churchill who could challenge him, who could escape him. So he started on honey trap. Beautiful women used their sexual charms to attack the political leaders, and some of them were arrested. Some political leaders had to resign in USA even, and that slowly ensured. Till today, if you study the history of the civilization, lockdowns have never been imposed for respiratory flu-like virus. Not a single scientist till now recommended such measures. Lockdowns have been imposed before once, and that was Ebola, and it was found to be ineffective. So, in in a speech on February 3, 2020, Z claimed full credit that, and he said, on January 7, I put forward requirements for prevention of coronavirus. I issued instructions for lockdown, and result is that there have been no casualties. At the same time, he had planted his stooge as a director of WHO. So the WHO China Joint Mission on Coronavirus confirms that Z personally directed and deployed the lockdown and the quarantine. So when China announced that Yuan would be locked for 23rd January, everyone knew that this was unprecedented. And Dr. Howard Merkel, a professor of medicine, said that this is going to be a game changer. As a matter of fact, WHO representative in China criticized it, and he said on 24th of January, trying to contain a city of 11 million is new to science. This lockdown is unprecedented and is not recommended. And then he was asked to keep shut by his boss. So what they did, they changed asked WHO to change the previous guidelines. And they acknowledged that what Z was doing was great. So first step they did was install a communist politician, Tedros, as head of the WHO. Tedros has lifelong links with China, has been a part of communist organization in Ethiopia. So he met Z on 28th January, and on 30th of January, without showing any interest in evaluating, he said, China is actually a new standard for the outbreak response. And this was caught on by the West because Tedros, the head of the WHO, is saying it must be correct, little knowing that it was a critical statement. Then the next step was getting Italy to lock down. Italy was hysterical. Now, the second process started creating hysteria, fear, with a fatality rate of less than 2%. They made a bugbear. And then there were acolytes of China, like Prime Minister Trudeau, who was easily impacted, as I said, well, what he is doing must be correct. So Z used these links created through BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and they persuaded Italy to go in for a lockdown. And this was coupled with cyber warfare and social media. Try to understand that cyber warfare is not just about sabotaging websites and hacking. It's about mass propaganda. There's a huge trained army of cyber warriors at the disposal of China. So what they started with, they started working on full force, fake radios, bullying of major politicians, creating demonstrations. Who knows, even the farmers' agitation in India might be one of those created by anti-Indian lobby of like Khalistanis and others. So fake media were mass produced in China in early March. And we know that not a single person outside Yuan has ever fallen and died or road to COVID. But China cyber warriors made a film of such an alleged event in Wuhan and shared it across the world. Then there was number of hits and runs created by China during this period. And on 15th of March, Chinese official agency taunted Sweden, UK, and Germany. And they started talking of the herd immunity. And these countries were unwilling to invest more in the human control. So China started saying they don't care about the humanity. The New York Times carried two articles. One was on 22nd of April 2020. It was called Chinese Agents Help Spread Message that showed virus panic in US. 6th of June was behind China's Twitter campaign, a murky sporting chorus. And these articles show that Twitter was being manipulated to amplify the hysteria. And the brigades, the Twitter brigade, including China's foreign minister official department. So the hysteria models were created, compromised media was created. And then we know that the earlier 1990 book, which I have told you, China sabotaged the West through its experts. Z visited the Imperial College and Professor Gas delivered a welcome speech highlighting Imperial role as a premier partner for research collaboration. China started giving money to all the universities, cultivated journalists across the world. Intelligence agencies should have found out whether the journalist who hyped up Ferguson model had received favors from China or not. They were actually useful idiots. Then China carefully groomed politicians. It's well known China has groomed Western bureaucrats like Daniel Andrew, the Premier of Victoria, who signed the BRI. And while the Melbourne, Australia did not sign it, a province signs it. Then there was a myth was created, Yuan laboratory myth. In 2013, President Obama had banned gain of function studies, which involved the man-made creation of new virus. In 2015, Dr. Fauci had approved NIH-funded 3.7 million project to undertake battery coronavirus research. And the biggest proponent was whistleblower Li Ming. And this is the first time that the whistleblower has not been punished because he was, in fact, a creation of that. So, whistleblower was a fake, a plant, Chinese plant to misdirect the attention of the world. magic use of misdirection, misinformation. And that was a war on the Western civilization, Indian civilization, Western economy, Indian economy. And I remember in March 2020, I was in Mumbai and I happened to talk to Rajiv Gauba, cabinet secretary, and I told him that lockdown would not be an option. But Indian bureaucracy is no match for the Jinnah's genius. India ignored brilliant scientists like Jayaprakash Mulligan, Jay Bhattacharya, Sunitra Gupta, and took China's bait. Hysterically, they declared lockout. Let's not forget that 67-year-old Z is not a passing fad. He is epitome of Chinese art of war. And he has created the new strategy, war strategy, a use of hysteria, destroying the economy of the country, creating unemployment, creating social unrest, creating resentment against the governments, and thus ensuring those countries self destruct. Politicians across the world have received power that lockdowns have brought. So they have tested the blood and they will like to follow these technique to become president for life or for a long time. They will not return liberty to the people anytime soon. You would see that lockdowns are going to be a regular feature. This intensity might increase, and that is destroying the economy of those countries, making them easy prey for China to have its worldwide global suzerainty, if not sovereignty. Whatever else we do, we must stop being hysterical. Hysteria has been generated and now is being used as a weapon. The intelligence agencies must establish teams to identify and expose China's role. And once this is established, then the government, the democratic governments at least, would be able to face this covert war and protect their countries. But is there a will to do that? That's a major concern. And if there is no will, China has succeeded in establishing its global supremacy, and nobody can doubt that. And that is thanks to the new warfare strategy. Generate hysteria, pull down the morale of the people, destroy the economy, and then gobble up that country. That is Chinese way. Think about it. Thank you.